Welcome to the Ambitious Coach Lab, powered by 90. I'm your host, Dr. Cam Lawson. Each week, we explore the real tactics, tough conversations, and breakthrough moments that drive coaching success. Let's jump into today's episode. Well, hey, friends, today I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Tony Miller, fellow PhD. So always good to have that in the house. But Tony's the director of basketball operations and an assistant coach for my alma mater, the Bob Jones University Bruins, where he's been a cornerstone of the program since 2012. He's got a doctorate in sports management and over a decade of experience mentoring student athletes. Tony brings a wealth of knowledge about player development, leadership, and fostering teamwork both on and off the court. Beyond coaching, he's a passionate educator and a champion of using athletics as a platform to inspire personal and spiritual growth. And on a very personal note, Tony was actually my high school basketball coach before he moved on to bigger and better things in the college world. So Tony and I go way back. He taught me everything I know about basketball, and then I decided to go the soccer route. So take it or leave it. But super excited about diving in. This is definitely going to be a less traditional ambitious coach show episode because we're talking to a sports coach. But I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn from Tony of how he manages different types of egos, manages teams, different levels of players. So I'm really excited to dive into this. But Tony, welcome to the show. So
I appreciate you having me on, Cam. Been looking forward to this and hope it provides some benefit for
oh,
somebody listening out there.
I'm sure it will. There's a lot of it's testable theory, but I truly believe there are lessons on the court. Obviously, a lot of people go to utilize sports as teamwork of how to be a great professional, but there's a lot of coaching aspects that I think business coaches can learn of how to work through different dynamics and all those things. So we're going to dive into that. But to kind of start off with, tell us a little bit more about how you got to where you're at to today.
Yeah, so finished up college 2005 and felt like I needed to go get my master's. I had a goal of teaching at the high school level and working in athletics at that level. And God just opened some doors here at the university. And so ended up staying here. And one of the caveats was they said, you need to go get your terminal degree. And it was fortunate at the time, was single and was able to put all my focus into that and finished it relatively quickly. So, got that early on experience in the classroom, but obviously that's a lot different from experience in person and life. So, like you said, ended up I was coaching a little bit at the high school level, coaching you and um,
Sorry.
primarily primarily with basketball. No, you did a great job. So, was coaching at the high school level, but then 2012, the university announced that they were going to start an intercollegiate program, and it actually coincided with me finishing up my degree, and I had to do basically an internship, and so I ended up coming on as a director of basketball operations, and that kind of morphed into fulfilled all my hours and responsibilities for that. And it morphed into an assistant coach position, and been on at that position ever since. And so that's kind of changed. Responsibilities have grown since then, but been very fortunate because the overlap between what I do, on the court with the athletic program, and then what I do in the classroom, and both provide examples for the other. And you mentioned and kind of alluded to this at the beginning, but sports and basketball, I say this to our guys all the time, is kind of a microcosm of life, and there are a lot of lessons that you can carry over. And I think that's what the opportunities that people see youth sports and even above that to learn the life lessons that can be carried over into real life. So yeah, I use it with the men's basketball program and things from the classroom and things in life and my own personal experience to hopefully mold some young men and young minds and getting to the point now where those guys have been out for a few years and they have their own families, and it's really cool to see their growth. And I love the whole process that goes into it. And it starts in the classroom, and it also allows me to kind of have a different level of connection to those guys. A lot of them are my students, and so just an opportunity to touch their lives in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. There's a lot of passion that you've always had, even back to, when I was a player for you,
Mhm.
but that investment aspect. And I think there are a lot of lessons. I mean, I can speak as on another wing of the university, but on the men's soccer team. I mean, the lessons that I learned, I probably learned more lessons off the field, than I did on the field, just because of my just path, but I think there's a lot of intentionality with the program at Bob Jones for that, of call it whatever you want, but really investing in mentorship, discipleship, whatever you wanna call it, but there is a level of that intentionality. Is that am I correct on that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the idea of the transformational leadership is something that I think, not just in sports, but those in business are trying to kind of carry over. And I think that part of it is our culture. I do think part of it has to do with just the age of those that are getting into leadership positions. Your priorities change when you start to get closer to midlife, especially if you have families and you kind of look at things a little bit differently. And the opportunity, my kids are only 8, 6, and 4, but I've got a room full. If you're watching, you can see behind. I've got a room full of the locker room here of 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds that I'm getting an opportunity to kind of be the surrogate parent for. They're not around their parents. And so I'm one of the main adults in their lives right now. And so the opportunity and kind of the responsibility that you feel to invest in those young men. And like I said, the sports is just an opportunity, a platform to talk about and um, invest in things that matter more. And you alluded to this as well, but you don't, and I know this at the time that they're not valuing the things that they're getting. Um, but I do know that looking back, they will value it more. And I just had a young man reach out to me a couple days ago and said, "Thank you so much for this and this and this." And it was stuff that at the time he valued, but not nearly as much as he values now, and so that perspective, and I think that's just part of the growing up, as a teacher, as a coach, as somebody that's just trying to mentor somebody younger than them, that go in with an understanding that they're probably not going to appreciate everything that you're giving to them at the time, but for a lot of people, they are going to look back and not just appreciate it, but really kind of mull over and think about and start to make the connections between maybe stuff that you said and the experiences that they have. Like the reality is that they just don't have the perspective. Like you don't know what you don't know, and so when you say this matters for this reason, they may agree with you, but they don't have the perspective of life to appreciate it. But then fast forward 5 or 10 years and they understand now and they probably will have some light bulb moments of, "Oh, I see now why he said that or they said that." And I make that connection and now that lesson that you taught 5, 10 years ago actually is something that they can implement in their lives. So it's just a whole process of learning and teaching and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, you look back and you realize, old Tony knew what he was talking about. Leave it in the middle because when you're 21, you know everything, right?
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right.
Well, man, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing. Let's dive a little bit into just and I'm fascinated with this concept of just team management, right? I believe that it translates whether you're on the court, whether you're off the court, in a conference room, the aspect of getting people to work together that have their own issues internally on a personal level. They also have goals that they're going after. But let's talk a little bit about those dynamics. And first thing, there are I would call it whether you call it ABC or different levels of play, but how do you identify your A players from your B players from your C players? Because I would imagine it's not just strictly talent. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So you said I'm an assistant coach for the men's team, but because of some health issues and some things that have gone on, I've had to step in and be the head coach off and on for about the last 3 years. And when you do that, it gives you a different perspective. When you're the assistant coach, you have all the answers. You just give all your suggestions, but the reality is it doesn't necessarily matter because you're not the one that has to make the final decision. And when I moved over 12 inches to that head coaching chair, things changed dramatically. You have to, in regards to team building, you have to consider the group and what you're trying to achieve. We'll talk more about this, like implementing your core values on a daily basis. Like you're a program manager. You're not just a leader in a program that's responsible for one aspect or a couple aspects. You have to consider everything. And one of those main things, obviously, is who your personnel are going to be. And so it's like spokes on a wheel. Like I can't just think about one spoke. I have to think about all the spokes and how it's going to support everything. And the individuals themselves don't think about that. Everybody thinks about like what's my role and how does
Mm,
this affect me and where am I trying to get and what are my goals and et cetera, et cetera. But as the coach, I'm trying to put together a unit that's going to be effective in my case on the basketball court. And so while even those that follow sports, basketball, we hear a lot today about like positionless basketball. And that's great. And there are a lot of overlapping skills and players looking similar in the abilities that they have. But the reality is you need people to execute specific things. And so even when I'm putting together a team, we're thinking about um, positions on the floor, and I need this role because I already have this role. You could have two players that look identical, but the reality is that one possesses skills or even mental capacities that are different from another. And we've taken time in the past to go through like personality assessments, disc assessments, to understand our players better. I think there's probably more overlap than most think in regards to the business world and the sports world, and even the
yeah.
execution of how you go about like team building. The reality is that college sports has become a multi-million dollar industry, maybe $1 billion industry, especially here in the last 18 months. And so it is like running a business. And a huge part of that is your personnel. If you don't have the personnel to execute on those things, then you as a head coach are going to very quickly find yourself not hired. And so the people are extremely important. Again, it's not just skill; it's personality wise. We talk a lot, Bob Jones, some of your listeners may not. It's a very unique place, and it requires a fit. And so, if you're not a fit for the organization, and that's not just here at Bob Jones, that's anywhere. That's Chick-fil-A, that's McDonald's, that's anywhere. If you're not a fit for that organization, you're not going to achieve levels of success like personally, and it's just not going to work for the team as well. And so there are a lot of different aspects that we have to consider far beyond just the skill. The skill obviously is important. You have to be able to dribble, pass, and shoot. You have to make decisions, but there's also stuff that has nothing to do with basketball that's important as well. So you have to consider that. Otherwise, you do find yourself, you may have a very skilled team in regards to basketball, but being able to actually accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, we haven't even talked about like systems of play. Not all systems of play are the same. Well, that would be the same for a business. Not the way that you go about your business is not the same as another business that's next door or down the street. And so you have to consider all of those aspects in regards to team building.
Hmm. That's so true because there are certain player, let's call it egos, that may not match with the team and the vision. I love that you brought that up because you all with your program have core values. You have a vision, and it's probably I'm going out on a limb here, but it's probably not just to win a national championship, right? There are other things that are part of it. I'm sure that's a huge part of it, but like, there are probably other aspects of your vision as an organization. So then when you're going out and recruiting and trying to find players, they've got to fit into all that. Obviously, from a skill standpoint, they have to fit into whatever role that they're in, but then also understanding and buying into the vision, into the core values, into the direction of where they're going. And then from a personality standpoint, you've got to fit that. So it's all these different puzzles that you as the coach are trying to work through. And obviously in the business world, a lot of times coaches are really more acting in, all right, they're helping the team kind of get to this point because the team's the one that's making that decision. So all analogies break down, right? But
Sure.
at the same time, there are a ton of correlations between the 2. So when you're going through, can you talk a little bit on just managing different egos? Because obviously you get in, maybe it's a highly recruited player or just an A team just coming in. How do you manage that ego? Because there is a level. I mean, I was an athlete, you were an athlete. There is something where you kind of instinctively know you're one of the better players on the team. But how do you manage that to continue to push those individuals towards the overall team goal.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is just simply recognizing that each individual is coming to this situation with their own set of expectations and their own set of goals, and that's not bad. I think for us as leaders and as managers, we want to think about what can this person do for our organization, and that's fair, but we also have to have the understanding that that person has their own set of goals and expectations, and especially in sports, I don't know to what degree, somebody that's working for an organization necessarily has this, but I've got people that are speaking into their ears as well, parents, friends, and everything else that's saying, these should be your goals, or you should be getting this amount of playing time, or you should be scoring this many points, or whatever. And again, I think just understanding that and recognizing that is a factor that has to be dealt with and communicated. But helping them then understand, I can help you achieve those goals or these goals. There may be some level of sacrifice, just as required of any team, but there is some level of sacrifice that's going to be required. But I'm not going to try to, push aside those things that are important to you because the team is bigger than you are.
Right.
That is the case. I mean, that's important if you're gonna achieve any level of success as a team, but still, I don't wanna just minimize those. And so when I'm talking to a guy, I do understand that there are different expectations that they have. I was just talking with one, they everybody thinks that they can come in and be name whatever sport, you're a college fan of, and they're a freshman. Everybody looks to the 1% of freshmen that come in that, have a stellar season and contribute right away, and that's ideal, but the reality is the majority of freshmen, when they come in, don't contribute like that right away. And so helping them understand, what their role can be and the expectations, again, managing expectations of what they can do in regards to this team. But then I also say to them, like, this is where I see you going in for us, the next 3 years, the next 4 years. And if I can cast that vision for them and put them on a plan to help them achieve those goals, there's more likely then for them to have buy-in. And so I do think as a manager and as a leader, you need to, as you have your one-on-one conversations, is to cast a vision for them and help them see that you are there to help them achieve their goals. But also, like, they're part of the team. They need to be doing what is needed and required, because for a freshman who has, a senior ahead of them, I don't need them to be that. But when that senior graduates over the next couple of years, I'm going to need you to step into that role, and your role will change. And that's the reality, is that even with you and I, like, we look back at our careers in the last 10 years, our roles and responsibilities have changed.
Mhm.
Even at the same organization, I'm at the same organization that I've been at for the last 17 years, and my roles and responsibilities have changed dramatically. I think a lot of times we get the perspective of what's happening in the moment, and a good leader will be able to help cast the vision for what can be in the future. And that's really what keeps all of us motivated. If you think that you are stuck and that nothing will ever change, you will leave that business, that organization, that team. And that's what's happening in college sports. If they think that their lot has been cast, then they'll transfer to another school. And then when it doesn't work out, they'll transfer to another school. It's the same thing in business. If you think that your lot has been cast, you will go to another job. And if you think that it has been cast again, you will go to another job. And so we see it all the time in different places. And I think that, again, is just partly on the leader to be able to help them see this is what can be if you put in the work, if you can continue to develop, etc.
Yeah. Man, the at 90, we have very, very clear roles and responsibilities, almost down to like daily, weekly activities of, hey, here's kind of percentages of the amount of time. And so what that does is that gives me tons of clarity on understanding of where I fit into the overall goals of where we're going. And then we've also gone out and built KPIs, we call it scorecard, where I have specific things that I know that I'm responsible for that are directly tied back to my roles and responsibilities. And it makes it really clear where I understand this is how I succeed, number one. And also, number two, where I'm going, like where we're all going as an organization, and then I can understand the flow of, okay, now when this opens up that I can move into this specific step or new role. And so it's really clear, but I think it does go straight back to the vision. So coaches working with organizations, helping them get to that point, because as you go down, typically, you do have mostly your A team players on a leadership or management team, right? That's who they're working with. But those individuals have to go back and manage their most likely B and C players who maybe just see it as a paycheck, or maybe
Mhm.
just, whatever it is. So there is an aspect of being able to tie it back to that vision. So putting that work in. Tell me this, what advice would you give a coach that's looking to foster that collaboration between A, B, and C players? You kinda alluded to it a little bit before, but, I mean, what would you give as an advice to understanding that dynamic on a deeper level?
Yeah, and to your point in regards to the A, B, and C, the reality too is that some of the players they come in, they just want to be a part of the team. Like they don't want to be the star. They just want to be a part of things. And so it is again on us as the leaders to identify what those different individuals are and what they're looking for and to provide that for them. I think in regards to kind of again, putting together the team and managing those different roles, it requires constant communication. And whether that's for us, having meetings from time to time, I think we minimize or maybe just don't necessarily understand the importance or the potential impact that informal conversations can have and the relationship building that can be done through those informal conversations. I think that's where a lot of times where most of our trust is built. We think that it's in big decisions, but the reality is that a lot of time trust is built through a lot of small interactions that again if you show that you care for somebody and really do have their best interests, they are more likely to buy into what you're trying to do. And again, if I can, I've kind of said this already several times, but you have to know for me, I have to know my players. And that only comes through a lot of interactions and conversations. I can think that I know somebody, but until I spend time with them, have meaningful conversations and interactions, get to know their hopes and dreams. And, you may not have that necessarily for your business and for your organization, but that can still happen to some degree. And when it does, I think it allows you to um, build more trust
Mm,
and thus create a better culture. And we haven't talked about that, but the culture is so important. I know it's a word that's kind of been overused, but I think we need to bring it back and bring it back in the right context. And that is a big part of helping the individuals understand and achieve success is understanding the culture and understand that their impact and their contribution to the culture can be something because we all are trying to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. When we're not, it seems to be a little bit empty and meaningless.
mm.
And so, if I can help them see that, then that kind of motivates them a little bit more to contribute to the group.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit on some of the traditions or practices that you all do for more of a team development standpoint of getting a group of guys that in the college level, I mean, that renews every year.
Yeah,
You seniors graduating, and then but it feels like nowadays guys are playing till they're like 29.
yeah,
So I don't, that changes everything. But obviously there is a cycle that goes through. So you're having to build a new team on a somewhat regular basis. And I would imagine a lot of business leaders feel that way now because it's just like you said, they don't tie in, they don't feel like they fit in. They go somewhere else. They transfer, they go to a different place. But so it feels like they're building teams constantly. But talk a little bit about just some of the specific things that you all do from a team development standpoint.
yeah. I do think that it's necessary. Just like the last couple of years in college sports has kind of confirmed this in my mind. You have to have carryover at least with some of your leaders, and for us, that's like upperclassmen.
Right.
The challenge I think going forward in college sports that you kind of addressed with businesses is when you are constantly having new people in, and it's a big group of new people, especially if it's your older players for us or your leaders or people that have been around for a while. They just don't know how things are done there. And that doesn't mean that they're not willing to learn, but there is just a time period that's required for that to happen. And that's the challenge for college sports teams is going to be how can I maintain the culture, um, even though I'm adding so many like this year we added 6 new players. So we've got 6 returnees and 6 brand new players. And it's not that those 6 new players are against what we're trying to do here. They just don't know how things go. And so how can I for us, the college basketball season is only about 7 months long. It's going to be on us and the coaches that will have the success are the ones who can accelerate that culture building process. And in a business or an organization, if you're constantly replacing people, what you're going to very quickly find if you are the leader in that organization, it's going to be extremely draining because you're starting over constantly. And we talk in sports all the time. A player led team is better than a coach led team.
Mm,
And I didn't. It's one of those things you see on a wall or on a T-shirt, but when I became the person that was the head coach that was responsible for that, that took on a new meaning
mm,
because it is very draining to have to constantly give that leadership and be that leadership. You may think that you want it, but if you're having to do it all the time, it's tough. And
mm,
that's where the leaders in your organization can be invaluable is that they provide that. For us, the players come in and say, "No, that's not something that we do here because that goes against one of our core values." And so you're constantly trying to teach your core values and not just talk about again something that's on a t-shirt or on a wall, or something that somebody slaps on the way out to the field. Like it's something that you actually live, and that's the hard part. Your culture is nothing more than how you do things, who you are, what you value, and it you can't just come into an organization and inherently know those, or somebody tells them to you, and now that's a part of your life. That's not how it works. It has to become a part of you, and that takes time. The only way to do that is through time, and so having to invest again in people is something that takes time, and sometimes people quickly pick it up, and sometimes it takes longer. That's just how learning goes, and so yeah, if you can get that carryover, it makes it a whole lot easier. We had last year, we had a group that had been here, multiple people who had been here multiple years, and we had the best season on the floor that we've ever had in regards to win percentage. We were like 21-5, won a couple games at the national tournament, but it was fun for us as coaches because the culture was already in place and the players led the team. We
mm.
just showed up, coached some basketball a little bit, but it was something that everything had already been put in place, and the olders were leading the youngers. Fast forward to this year, we've those guys graduated, and now we've got 6 new guys, and it's been a little bit harder. It's again not that they're resistant to what we're trying to do, but it just takes time for them to learn what we're doing. And so, I think it's important for a leader to understand and recognize what they actually have in regards to their personnel and be honest with themselves and not be too frustrated when things don't go as well or aren't going as well. It just may just be that people need time, or maybe you need to invest more in things that are connected to your culture than the X's and O's and the execution of whatever you think your business strategy needs to be.
Right. I mean, that's such a great application to the mindset of an ambitious coach in the business world where they're working that's the end goal is to get it to be a player led,
Yeah.
that's the whole reason they've brought that coach in is to get to that point. I mean, can you talk a little bit about some of how you encourage those, let's call them the olders, like you referenced, the older players that have been around, the more seasoned, if you want to call it a player, like how do you get those individuals to do more of that, on court, off court mentorship of the younger players to get that culture to be that tight knit thing like you guys had last year?
Yeah, as silly as this sounds, it's not just telling them be a better leader. That doesn't
Right.
work. It is assigning to them responsibilities, being creative in how you go about doing things. Um, I kind of talked about this before, but creating opportunities for them to interact in those informal settings. We do something. Sometimes we'll have we call it forced family fun, where we just get together, whether that's like at an away game, at a hotel lobby and play a goofy game together. or just going out to a meal, going over to coach's house, watching a football game, spending time together. Again, I think just the time and the relationships and the interactions are invaluable. Sometimes it is a little bit more formal, setting up partners. We have right now, we're doing like a captain's council where we have three guys, and those three guys are responsible for three or four guys on the team. And so they check in with them and eat meals with them. It could be a one on one. You may have enough where you have, if you have six olders and six youngers, where you pair them up. Like I said, I think it should be some planned things and some lesser planned things, those forced family fun opportunities, but just creating opportunities and time,
Mm.
for people to spend together, I think is the best way to go about doing it. Y You mentioned, and we were talking about the culture and some of the things that we do. I think it's also setting up sometimes even some silly things that for us, it would be different for a 19 to 21-year-old than if you're working with 30 pluses or
Right.
whatever. But we have, if you're watching, there's a couple in the background. You'd have to look really hard. We we got this from a friend of ours. He goes to like the dollar store and buys dollar figurines of superheroes. And every Monday, we picked that up, but we bought the bigger ones, so they're kinda like the 12-inch, and there's a Spider-Man one over here off to my right, there's a Black Panther, a Captain America, and then we have a really big trophy, and each of those we give out on Monday. So we collect them at the end of the week and then give them out again to somebody else the next week. And for us, it's based off of stats analytics, and so whoever shoots the highest percentage or whatever it is, it's some sort of goal that's achieved, and they're the top goal getter. They get that award, and we give those out every Monday. And I think just having that group recognition where I'm
Yes.
recognizing you in front of everybody else and celebrating you can go a super long ways, and just motivating people. And it reestablishes the culture because the things that we're giving out are the things that matter to our program and to our organization. So you could pick something like that. As goofy as that sounds, you may say that's dumb. That's not going to work for my 30 pluses year old. I mean, 30-year-olds still like Marvel movies. You probably hand out something like that, and I think it's goofy. We had end of the year, we always have after the season's over, we do individual meetings, so kind of like wrap things up, wrap the season up. And we'll ask them, what are some things we could start doing, stop doing, continue doing? And when it came to the continue doing, out of the like 14 people that we had, 12 of them said the number one thing that they mentioned was those goofy figurines. Like, I really like how we hand those out every week and recognize somebody, even guys that didn't win the awards very often. Like, that was the coolest thing. And so I
Huh.
think sometimes even the goofy things that you think
Yeah.
are silly are things that other people think are cool or fun or can have an impact. And so finding something like that that's specific to your organization, to your brand, can potentially be, it's not the thing that's gonna set your culture and be the thing that determines whether or not you become a Fortune 400 company or whatever, but it could be the thing that motivates people or encourages them to come to work or just makes it a little bit special. It's the accumulation of those little things
Yeah.
that make your business and your organization. It's not the one big decision or the big thing that you do that determines whether or not people are going to actually produce and contribute to the group.
Mm. Yeah, the idea of celebration, 'cause I love that. It often is the little tiny things that and it taps into this deep human need for
Yeah.
approval.
Yep.
And it goes in, and when you get that, can you talk a little bit about how you celebrate the collective successes of the team? Obviously, there are absolutely times where you want to celebrate individual contributions to the team, and I think you should because I think that encourages performance, right? But then also celebrating for more of, "Hey, look at what we did as a team." Can you kinda talk through that dynamic of how you plan that?
Yeah, understanding what matters for us. We talk about what matters to winning,
Mm,
and this is where I'll apologize to you. I probably had you guys doing goofy drills like diving on the floor and taking charges, and those things happen in a game, and they are important to a degree. But fast forward now to the 2000s. and there's a book that's specific to basketball, and what they've found is that there are essentially four factors or four variables that matter to winning. And I won't bore the audience, but there are specific stats that basically, if these things are met or achieved, or if you have better of these than the other team has, then you'll win the game. And I know you're not necessarily competing in a business against somebody else. Like at the end of the day, somebody won and somebody lost per se,
Right.
but still, like what matters to winning. And I think it's important for the leader to really determine what actually matters to winning, because then that really determines how you spend your time or what you spend your time on, or in your case, what you actually focus on. And I think there's probably a lot of time that's wasted, as there had been in my practices as well, doing drills that it's not that those things have no bearing on the outcome of a game. It's just that these other things carry so much more weight in regards to whether we win or lose, that for us, we only have 2 hours in a practice. Well, if I'm practicing taking a charge for 10 minutes or for 20 minutes, where in a game there's only 1 or 2 opportunities to take a charge. At the college level, you can't it's almost impossible to get a charge every bit nowadays.
Yeah.
So why would I be spending 10 to 15 minutes on that when I could take those minutes and be spending them on getting more shots up?
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, the number one factor of whether or not you win a basketball game is what your effective field goal percentage is. In other words, you make more shots than the other team does, and you shoot them at a high rate.
mm,
So for you as a business, what are you spending your time on? What are you having your people spend time on? And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is we'll come in after a game and we don't talk about 20 different things and this is what we did right, this is what we did wrong. We come in after the game, and I have up here to the right, you can't see it, but there's a chart that shows the four factors. And
mm,
so we go back and we communicate to the team, hey, we had this, the other team had this, we had this, the other team had this, we had this, the other team. And really that's all we talk about after a game. And so if we achieve those goals, then we say to them, hey, we got this, awesome job. Or we didn't get this, we need to focus in on these two things this week at practice to improve, because the team that we have coming up does these better than the, but it's really just those four things.
mm,
And so again, I think it's important for you to actually know what matters to winning, whatever winning looks like for you. And that's again having clear objectives, having those smart objectives of knowing what you're actually trying to achieve and accomplish. And then are your people actually doing things and spending time on things that are going to actually impact those things? And then when they do, celebrate those things, celebrate them with a small figurine in front of everybody else, or with a party, or with a whatever you deem appropriate for your age group. But I think reinforcing that reinforces the culture of our program, what matters and how do we do things and what are we going to spend our time on. And that's really, we've talked a little bit about culture, but if if you can integrate and interweave everything together, that's where you're able to really see a high level of execution.
mm,
It's not just we talk about this as being our culture, but the culture actually is everything that you're talking about. And then celebrate when culture is actually achieved or demonstrated. One other thing that we do is at the end of practice, we come together and huddle up and we ask them two questions. The first thing is, what did you do for a teammate today? And so they're able to, it's an opportunity. It's not for somebody else to say this person. So I don't say Cam did this for me today. Cam actually says, hey, I went and got Tony lunch today, or I took him to Walmart to go get some stuff that he needed, or I did his laundry, or I brought the uniforms to the room for everybody. All right, everybody, 2 claps, and we celebrate goofy, like, little small stuff like that,
yeah.
and then, we'll ask them, "What did you do for a teammate today?" And then, "Do you wanna celebrate anybody else?" Then that's an opportunity for somebody else to celebrate you. So I say, "Cam did awesome today at practice." He's been the last 3 days, he's really been locked in, and, I felt like he's really just kind of, like, contributed to the whole group. And so again, it's another opportunity for all of us to recognize each other. And I don't know that you're going to do that in the office, but creating something like that where people can celebrate each other and recognize other people, um, gives us the opportunity to celebrate the culture that we're trying to build.
Man, that's I distinctly remember in a, session when I was working for a company and we had hired a business coach to come in, we actually did almost that exact same thing. We went down and put on paper where it was, "Hey, things Cam does," and, all the other leadership team
Yeah,
members, what they do well and things that they could work on. And
yeah,
I still look at that. Like, that was, like, 5 years ago.
yeah,
And, things that if I'm ever feeling down, like, "Hey, this is what I'm good at." And then, "Hey, here's some things that I needed to work on back then, and let me look at that and see how I've done." But, like, that's still as silly as it was, that meant a lot to me to where I still look at that on a regular basis, and I think it encourages those types of behaviors where we're celebrating the things that are meaningful to the organization or going towards the vision, and when other people see that in us, that makes us wanna do that much more. So, man, I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah.
Tell me, I always like to ask guests that come on this show 2 questions to confirm. If you've watched by this point, you probably know. But what would advice if you could go back to rookie coach Tony with all of the knowledge and experience and everything that you have now? What would you tell yourself and why?
Yeah, to be a continual learner.
Hmm.
I think I have been, but I always feel like you could be that even more. I think part of it has to do with the fact that I have an educational background and I am a teacher and I enjoy learning, but it has served me well to kind of be on the forefront and try to do whatever in whatever industry, basketball, I do some marketing, teaching, like try to be at the forefront of things and try things out. If it doesn't go well, then, put it aside. Not everything new is great and works, but being a continual learner allows you to be on the forefront of things, and I think it does allow you to experience success faster. When we're young, like you said earlier, we think that we know everything. In basketball, I thought I knew everything at like age 20. I got to 30, and I was like, I don't know as much as I probably could. I got to 40 and I was like, I don't know anything about basketball. Basketball. I think that's good. And I do think level of humility grows as you get older and you kind of get perspective of the whole world. But use that humility to continue learning. Um, you know, we have so much knowledge and so much information that it's not just a consumption of knowledge. Um, I think being a continual learner, a large part of that is executing on the things that you're learning and discovering whether or not those things actually are profitable. There are things that we do in practice that I try because I saw somebody else do it or heard somebody else say that it was a good way to do things, and it just didn't work out for what we were trying to accomplish or what I would have wanted out of it, and so we don't do it anymore. But I at least tried it and gave it the opportunity, and some of those things have sparked ideas for other ways of doing things, and that never would have happened if I said, "This is the way to do it." Basketball is a perfect illustration of this. Basketball coaches are notorious for this, but we're still doing certain drills that we did 30 years ago, and it's not those drills are bad. There's just better ways of doing it. But if I were to confront somebody who still does drills that way, they would say to me, "Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. My coach won state championships and his coach won state championships, and if they were good enough for them, then I'm going to do them that way."
Hmm.
And I can't argue with that, like, okay, but there are better ways to do things now. We have more knowledge about processes and systems that we could be more efficient and better. Are there things in your business that you could be more efficient or better at? It's not that the old way of doing it was wrong. There are just better ways and newer ways to do things that could make you more efficient and more effective. You don't know that if you refuse to be a continual learner.
Yeah, man, that's so good. Because I think it what you're saying ties directly into we believe that there are 5 core competencies of building an ambitious coaching practice. I know it's a little different for like a college or sports related coach, but these business coaches build their practice and they get their clients and they start to do things. But the last one is mastery. It's going in, and I think it taps straight into being a continual learner.
Mhm.
You can always be better. You can always learn a new thing. You can get a new certification. You can learn a new system, all these different things of that continuous learning because as you know, the world adapts and we need new things, and there are new generations that receive information different. So you have to stay on the top of your game. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And then the second question that I always love to ask is, what's a lesson you're in the middle of learning right now?
Yeah, I've tried to think a little bit about this. It seems like things do go in ebbs and flows in regards to learning. Sometimes you're just kind of in it and trying to keep your head above water. But I think that the ability to be flexible and to, like we talked about earlier, being more transformational in my relationships with others. Um, like I said, it changed a little bit once I started having kids. But you have to be flexible when you have kids because they either don't learn as quickly as you would like, or things don't go the way that you thought that they were supposed to go. And when you approach things with a transformational mindset, there is a level of flexibility that is required, but also if you do execute on that with some level of flexibility, I think it benefits the people that you're working with because not everybody learns the same way. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned from another coach, for us in sports, I've got them, like I said, for 4 years, but each guy is running his own race. And it's very difficult for the individuals, the players, to not look to the person to their right or to their left and say that person's achieving this level of success. Why am I not having this level of success? And for me to step in and say to them, stop looking at that person. They're not even running the same race as you. You're in your own race right now. And so we need to improve on these things, and you'll get better and you'll see growth. But you can't be looking at the people to your right or to your left. And so being able to step in and help people, and again, I may have expectations for them or think that they're going to be able to achieve this level of success, and they just don't because something else is keeping them, holding them back. And that's the other thing too that we need to consider as leaders is that you would like to say, come to work and leave all your problems at home so that you can be, effective for me here in the workplace. But like people bring baggage and other things from other places. And so being flexible, being empathetic towards what's going on in their life will impact what happens. Those things off the court, in my case, impact what happens here on the court. And so, again, being kind and empathetic to what's going on in their life, that those things I think reflect a more transformational mindset that I didn't have early on, and being more so like that is something that I need to continue to grow at.
Yeah, man, that's good. um, if people want to get in touch with you, maybe they have a question or maybe want to learn more about the program, I mean, all sorts of different things, but what's a great way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm on X, Twitter at Tony W Miller, and then Instagram I know is where most people are at, but that's at Coach.Miller, and my DMs are open. Feel free to reach out.
Love it. Yeah, I still am getting used to saying X, so I don't think I'll ever get used to it.
Yeah.
But no, man, I appreciate you sharing all the wisdom, kind of diving into just managing teams. I know it was helpful for me to think through. Obviously, less traditional episode, but sometimes I think those are the best ones. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom. But thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful to you. If you are an ambitious coach and you would like to dialogue on some of these things that Tony's mentioned or some of these other core competencies as you're building your practice, that is what we do at 90. We love helping coaches build their practices. So feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on email. It's just cam at 90, the full word, cam at 90.io. Would love to be able to dialogue with you about anything related to your practice. Hopefully, you have a good rest of your day. Bye. That's it for today's episode of the Ambitious Coach Lab. My hope is that something here helps you sharpen your craft and keep building a coaching practice you're proud of. Before we wrap, a quick thank you to our sponsor, 90. If you're coaching leadership teams, having your clients run their entire world in 90 truly elevates your work. Vision, rocks, scorecards, issues, it all lives in one centralized place. The clarity keeps your clients aligned between sessions and makes every conversation you have with them more focused and more impactful. I've used 90 with over 500 leadership teams, and I can tell you it makes great companies better and great coaches even more effective. Feel free to use promo code AC20 for 20% off. Again, that's AC20 for 20% off. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm Cam. cheering you on as you grow your ambitious coaching practice. We'll see you next time.